Welcome back to Channel Name. Today, we're diving into one of the most controversial and thought-provoking topics. New research puts doubt on Muhammad's existence. For centuries, Muhammad has been regarded as the central figure of Islam, but could history have it wrong? Recently unearthed studies and historical analyses have sparked debates that could reshape our understanding of one of the most influential figures in world history. Stick around to hear the evidence and decide for yourself. For over 1,400 years, Muhammad has been celebrated as the prophet of Islam, whose revelations form the Quran. Traditional Islamic sources, such as the Hadith and Sirah literature, paint a vivid picture of his life, mission, and teachings. But here's the catch: most of these sources were written decades, even centuries, after his death in 632 CE. This reliance on secondary accounts has led scholars to question their historical reliability. Islamic historians argue that while Muhammad's life is tied to historical events like the Hijra, migration to Medina, and battles like Badr, these accounts lack independent verification from contemporaneous non-Islamic sources. Is this a case of exaggerated storytelling, or is there more to the story? Recent research by revisionist historians casts doubt on whether Muhammad as a historical figure ever existed in the form described by Islamic tradition. Critics point to a startling lack of archaeological evidence and contemporaneous records. For instance, early coins and inscriptions from the 7th century CE don't explicitly reference Muhammad but instead feature vague mentions of the servant of God. Furthermore, the Quran itself lacks clear historical context. This absence of definitive ties to a specific time or place leaves room for speculation about whether the figure of Muhammad was a later construct to unify the Arabian tribes under a single religious identity. Could this be a case of political mythology? Traditional Islamic scholars firmly reject these claims. They argue that the lack of archaeological evidence is not surprising, given the nature of the Arabian Peninsula's oral culture and the harsh desert environment that preserves little. Moreover, they assert that the Quran's consistency and linguistic mastery suggest divine revelation through a real historical figure. Manuscripts like the Birmingham Quran, carbon dated to within Muhammad's lifetime, are presented as evidence of the prophet's existence. Similarly, historians point out that early Christian and Byzantine sources reference an Arabian prophet, albeit vaguely. Is this enough to confirm the traditional narrative? The idea of questioning Muhammad's existence is more than an academic exercise, it has far-reaching implications. For over 1 billion Muslims worldwide, Muhammad is not just a historical figure but a spiritual guide and symbol of faith. Casting doubt on his existence challenges the foundations of Islamic theology, law, and identity. On the other hand, some argue that revisiting history isn't about undermining faith but about fostering a more nuanced understanding of how religions evolve over time. Can faith and historical inquiry coexist peacefully, or does this lead to an unavoidable clash? At its core, this debate isn't just about Muhammad, it's about how we approach history, faith, and evidence. Does the absence of proof mean something didn't happen? Or should we trust the collective memory of a community, even if the evidence is circumstantial? Whether you're a believer, skeptic, or somewhere in between, these questions challenge us to think critically about how narratives are built and preserved. In a world where history often blurs with mythology, seeking the truth is a journey that enriches us all. One critical angle of this debate focuses on the Quran itself. Many scholars argue that the Quran's poetic structure and thematic complexity suggest it evolved over time rather than being delivered in a singular prophetic moment. Could it have been compiled by multiple authors rather than revealed to one man? This theory doesn't discount the Quran's influence but instead emphasizes its potential as a collaborative cultural product. If true, what does this mean for its attribution to Muhammad? Arabia in the 7th century was largely an oral society. Stories, poetry, and history were transmitted verbally, often with embellishments to enhance memorability. Some researchers argue that Muhammad's story might have been shaped or even created entirely through oral tradition, later written down and codified. Could the story of Muhammad be a composite of various leaders and sages from the region? Islam's rise coincided with the unification of Arab tribes under a single religious banner. Historians suggest that Muhammad's life and teachings might have been retroactively constructed to legitimize this unification. His story could have served as a rallying point to solidify political power. Was Muhammad's existence less about an individual and more about creating a shared identity for a nascent empire? While Islamic texts provide extensive details about Muhammad, external sources are far less detailed. Early Byzantine and Christian records mention an Arab prophet, but they often lack specificity. Are these references enough to confirm Muhammad's existence, or do they merely reflect second-hand accounts? The absence of contemporaneous records leaves a significant gap in the historical puzzle. Despite extensive research, archaeologists have found little direct evidence linking Muhammad to his purported time and place. While artifacts like coins and inscriptions from the era exist, they often fail to mention him by name. Does this suggest a historical oversight, or does it point to something more deliberate? A deeper look into early Islamic texts reveals inconsistencies and contradictions. Some of the earliest biographies of Muhammad differ significantly from later accounts. Were these discrepancies the result of evolving narratives, or do they hint at a fabricated history? Scholars continue to debate whether these inconsistencies strengthen or weaken the case for Muhammad's existence. 12. The impact on faith. For devout Muslims, Muhammad's existence is a cornerstone of their belief system. Questioning this foundation can be deeply unsettling. However, many argue that faith isn't necessarily tied to historical evidence but to spiritual conviction. Can faith endure even if history remains uncertain? Muhammad's story is set against the backdrop of a politically fragmented Arabia. His teachings and leadership reportedly united warring tribes. Could his narrative have been retroactively designed to explain the rapid expansion of the Islamic Empire? This theory raises questions about how history and politics intertwine. The debate over Muhammad's existence is far from academic. It has sparked outrage, debate, and dialogue across the globe. Traditionalists view it as an attack on Islam, while others see it as an opportunity for critical inquiry. How should societies balance historical exploration with respect for religious beliefs? The doubts surrounding Muhammad aren't unique. Similar debates exist about figures like Jesus, Buddha, and Moses. Historical records for these figures are also sparse, relying heavily on faith-based texts. Is the scrutiny of Muhammad's existence part of a broader trend in historical analysis? Some critics argue that questioning Muhammad's existence is rooted in Western colonial attitudes, aiming to delegitimize Islamic culture. Others see it as a natural evolution of historical inquiry. Is this debate a product of cultural bias, or is it driven by genuine academic curiosity? Linguistic analysis of the Quran and early Islamic texts offers new insights into their origins. Some researchers argue that linguistic inconsistencies suggest multiple authorship. Others believe these differences reflect the Quran's oral transmission. How much can language reveal about the past? Artifacts like the Dome of the Rock inscriptions, dating to the late 7th century, mention Muhammad but are open to interpretation. These artifacts are among the earliest mentions of him outside Islamic texts. Do these inscriptions confirm his existence, or do they merely reflect evolving traditions? The academic world remains divided. Some historians believe there's enough circumstantial evidence to support Muhammad's existence. Others argue that the lack of direct evidence is too significant to ignore. This division highlights the challenges of reconstructing history from limited sources. As technology and research methods evolve, new discoveries may shed light on Muhammad's existence. Whether through archaeology, textual analysis, or other means, the search for answers continues. Will we ever know the full truth, or will Muhammad's story remain a mix of faith and mystery? One of the intriguing aspects of early Islamic history is its coinage. Coins minted during the 7th century often bore inscriptions referencing Allah but lacked explicit mention of Muhammad until later periods. This delay has raised questions about whether Muhammad's role as a prophet was solidified over time rather than during his lifetime. Are these coins evidence of a gradually evolving narrative, or do they reflect the early stages of Islamic development? Mecca and Medina are central to the story of Muhammad, yet archaeological evidence from these cities during the 7th century remains sparse. While both cities are revered in Islamic tradition, some researchers suggest their prominence may have been retroactively emphasized. Could the historical role of these cities have been elevated to align with religious narratives? Arabian society in Muhammad's era was deeply tribal, with alliances and rivalries shaping the region's dynamics. Historians propose that the creation of a singular prophet figure might have been a strategic move to unify disparate tribes under one spiritual and political leader. If true, does this diminish Muhammad's historical reality, or does it highlight the genius of early Islamic leadership? The first Muslim communities reportedly formed in Medina under Muhammad's leadership. However, some scholars question whether these early communities were as cohesive as described. Evidence suggests they may have been loosely connected groups with differing interpretations of Islam. Could this variation hint at the gradual emergence of a unified Islamic identity? While Islamic texts are the primary source of Muhammad's story, non-Islamic accounts from neighboring regions also reference an Arabian prophet. These accounts, however, are often vague and lack the details found in Islamic tradition. Do these external references support Muhammad's existence, or are they merely echoes of Islamic narratives? The methodology used to study Muhammad differs from that used for other historical figures. Historians often rely on textual analysis, archaeology, and comparative studies. Yet, the unique challenges of 7th century Arabia complicate these efforts. Should we adapt our historical methods when studying figures like Muhammad, or hold all historical inquiry to the same standards? Belief plays a significant role in how historical narratives are constructed and accepted. For Muslims, Muhammad's existence is not just a matter of historical fact but a cornerstone of faith. Conversely, skeptics prioritize evidence over tradition. Can both perspectives coexist, or are they fundamentally at odds? Islamic law, or Sharia, is said to have originated with Muhammad's teachings. However, historical studies suggest that much of Islamic law developed after his death, shaped by later scholars and rulers. Does this point to a historical Muhammad whose teachings were expanded upon, or to a constructed narrative attributed to him? Advancements in technology, such as carbon dating and digital manuscript analysis, offer new ways to explore historical questions. These tools could potentially uncover new evidence about Muhammad's existence or the origins of early Islam. What might the next discovery reveal about this centuries-old debate? The Sirah, or biographies of Muhammad, are rich in detail but were written long after his death. Critics argue that these texts reflect more about the needs of the Islamic community at the time of writing than about the historical Muhammad. Could these biographies be as much about myth-making as about history? Faith communities play a significant role in preserving and shaping historical narratives. In the case of Muhammad, Islamic scholars and believers have meticulously guarded his story for over a millennium. Does this stewardship strengthen the case for Muhammad's existence, or does it reflect a human need to construct cohesive narratives? Throughout history, Muhammad's story has been used to legitimize political authority, from the Rashidun caliphs to modern Islamic states. This political utility raises questions about whether his narrative was shaped to serve specific agendas. Could politics have influenced how Muhammad's story was recorded and remembered? The Quran is said to have been revealed to Muhammad over 23 years. However, skeptics question whether these revelations were divinely inspired or the product of a gifted individual or group. If Muhammad didn't exist, who or what was the source of these profound teachings? The Hadith, or sayings of Muhammad, are central to Islamic practice but were compiled centuries after his death. This delay has led to debates about their authenticity and their role in shaping the Prophet's image. Could the Hadith reflect more about the needs of the early Islamic community than the life of Muhammad himself? Regardless of historical debates, Muhammad's legacy has undeniably shaped global history. From the spread of Islam to its influence on art, science, and politics, his story continues to inspire billions. Does this enduring impact make questions about his existence less relevant? Some researchers suggest that the Quran reflects broader cultural and religious trends of late antiquity rather than the teachings of a single prophet. This perspective challenges the traditional view of Muhammad as its sole recipient. Could the Quran's origins lie in a collective cultural experience rather than one man's revelations? Islamic artifacts, including early mosque inscriptions and manuscripts, offer tantalizing glimpses into the past. However, their interpretation often depends on the assumptions we bring to the table. What new insights might these artifacts hold about Muhammad's existence? Collective memory shapes how societies remember their past. In Muhammad's case, oral traditions and communal storytelling have played a significant role. Does this reliance on memory strengthen or weaken the case for his historical existence? The debate about Muhammad's existence persists because it touches on deeply personal and universal themes: faith, history, and identity. For some, it's about seeking truth. For others, it's about preserving what they hold sacred. Will this debate ever find resolution, or is it destined to continue indefinitely? As this debate unfolds, it's crucial to approach it with respect and understanding. Historical inquiry and faith don't have to be enemies, they can coexist and enrich one another. What do you think is the best way to navigate these sensitive yet important conversations? The rapid expansion of the Islamic Caliphate after Muhammad's death solidified his status as a unifying figure. Historical records from the Umayyad and Abbasid eras often emphasize Muhammad's prophetic role. Critics argue that these records may have been crafted to legitimize political power. Was Muhammad's story amplified to serve the political ambitions of early Islamic rulers? Pre-Islamic Arabia was a melting pot of religious influences, including Christianity, Judaism, and Zoroastrianism. Some scholars suggest that Muhammad's teachings reflect a synthesis of these traditions, adapted to the Arabian context. Could Muhammad's teachings have been inspired by the religious environment of his time, or do they represent a distinct divine revelation? The role of Muhammad's early followers is critical in the spread of Islam. Figures like Abu Bakr, Umar, and Ali played significant roles in shaping the Islamic community. Skeptics question whether their actions were based on allegiance to a historical Muhammad or an emerging ideology. Could these early converts have been instrumental in crafting Muhammad's story? The Quran's language has been described as unparalleled in its eloquence and style, leading many to believe it could not have been the work of a single individual. However, skeptics argue that its linguistic features might reflect the collective genius of a society rich in oral traditions. Does the Quran's unique style point to divine inspiration, or does it suggest a broader cultural contribution? One of the earliest Islamic inscriptions, found on the Dome of the Rock in Jerusalem, mentions Muhammad as the messenger of God. While this is seen as evidence of his existence, some argue that the inscription could reflect an evolving religious narrative. How definitive is this inscription in proving Muhammad's historical reality? The rituals of Islam, such as prayer, fasting, and pilgrimage, are said to have originated with Muhammad. However, some historians suggest these practices predate Islam and were adapted into its framework. If these rituals existed before Islam, does this undermine the traditional narrative about Muhammad's role in their establishment? Poetry was a cornerstone of pre-Islamic Arabian culture. Some researchers argue that Muhammad's revelations might have been influenced by this oral poetic tradition. The Quran's rhythmic and poetic structure supports this theory. Does this connection to poetry strengthen or challenge the claim that Muhammad received divine revelations? Women like Khadija and Aisha played significant roles in Muhammad's life and the early Islamic community. Their accounts are among the most detailed in Islamic tradition. Critics question whether these portrayals were crafted to emphasize specific moral or social ideals. How much of their stories reflect historical truth, and how much reflects later societal values? The development of early Islamic texts parallels the evolution of early Christian writings. Both traditions faced challenges in preserving and standardizing their narratives. Could the differences and similarities in their development offer insights into the historical reliability of Muhammad's story? Trade routes across Arabia connected the region to the wider world, facilitating the spread of ideas and cultures. Muhammad is often depicted as a merchant before his prophethood, a role that could explain his exposure to diverse influences. Did his background in trade shape the messages and values attributed to him?
Welcome to Blessovia Science TV, where we take you on an exhilarating journey through the cosmos and unravel the mysteries of science. We are excited to offer you the opportunity to become a valued member of our ever-growing community of cosmic enthusiasts and knowledge seekers. Exclusive access to cosmic content. As a member of Blessovia Science TV, you will gain exclusive access to a treasure trove of cosmic content, including documentaries, interviews with leading scientists, space missions updates, and awe-inspiring visualizations of the universe, live Q, and sessions with experts. Your membership will grant you the chance to participate in live Q and sessions with renowned scientists, astronomers, and space explorers. Get your burning questions answered by those who push the boundaries of human knowledge. Embark on a journey that spans the cosmos and join us in unraveling the secrets of the universe. Become a Blessovia Science TV member today, and together we will reach for the stars. Thanks for watching. Subscribe, like, and share. Don't forget to leave your comment.